We have a lot of moving parts over the next couple of weeks as we break down the details for you and give you an overall setup on what's to come. If we expand the view this morning on the North American view, we're coming out of a very cold air mass that was locked over a good part of the eastern U.S. Now that has since now retreated, and replace of that is a massive ridge of high pressure with the jet stream well to the north up into Canada. That's going to send those temperatures soaring later on this afternoon and really for the next 5 days. And we've got a pretty significant trough out west. That's a major system off the west coast that will send waves and waves of precipitation into California with a lot of heavy rainfall, even some flooding rains. But we've got numerous record high temperatures going to be unfolding later on this afternoon for your Friday, November the 14th. All those areas encircled, yes, that could be a potential new record high, and that is 44, folks. 44 new record highs could be broken today. We're talking 80s across Texas and Oklahoma. All the 70s extend from Kansas, really all the way into South Dakota. Yeah, for middle of November, that is very warm weather. And there's the rain as we head into later on this afternoon, especially into the evening time frame. They've already got a lot of rain to the north. Now that has shifted down into Southern California. So we're looking at a moderate risk for excessive rainfall for those areas into Santa Barbara, back into Oxnard, getting into the Los Angeles region. And it's a compounding effect. We've got heavy snows in the mountain ranges, the Sierras. That snow will be piling up into feet. And that's just not a today problem, and extends into tomorrow with another moderate risk for excessive rainfall in the same similar areas of Santa Barbara back into Los Angeles. In fact, this could be some of the heaviest rain of this entire event. And then even as you move inland, you're got into Bakersfield, back into Los Angeles, back into Las Vegas. But yeah, those areas that are highlighted in red could easily see 2 to 4 inches. If not 5 to 8 in some of the foothill regions. So yes, that could produce some flash flooding in a lot of areas and mudslides. But there's the heat, folks. That heat is the real deal over the next couple of days, as that ridge will be sending record-breaking temperatures across the middle part of the country. 15, 20, 25 degrees above average. The only cooler anomalies in town, well, you've got rain underneath. Most of the red is not going to be raining too much at all over the next 5 days. And there's Sunday. So we've even got Sunday, plenty warm conditions, more record high temperatures likely going to be broken on those days for the middle part of the country. And it's really not until Monday that we have the system move inland. But then followed that, we have yet another system that will be coming in off the west coast, reinforcing the rain back into areas of California. Yet again, this will also swing into Southern California. But this time, once this moves inland, it'll finally get into the central U.S. and bring some heavy rainfall, not likely until Wednesday and Thursday. But again, we got more heat to contend with on Monday. So we've got, again, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, heading into Monday. This could be even a more significant day as you top out even into the upper 80s, if not 90 degrees in a good part of Texas. A lot of records would likely be unfolding on Monday while we're waiting for the next system. And as we are waiting for the next system across the middle part of the country, we've got the Gulf ready, open for business. And of course, we've got a lot of heat built up in the upper latitudes. Once that system comes in out west, that's going to produce a heavy rain setup going into Wednesday and Thursday across Texas and Oklahoma, getting into Arkansas, back into Missouri. We could be looking at some significant rain, but the heat is the real deal over the next 5 days for, November standards, right? This isn't hot per se, but it's definitely hot considering what it should be like in November if you're 25 to 25 degrees above average for the next 5 days. And all that will end with the rain that's going to ensue on Wednesday and Thursday. So if we look at the precipitation totals between now and say next Friday, over the next 7 days, look where most of the rain is, right? With obviously that system just kind of hanging out, if not stalling at times, out west. And then we have that second system that comes in on Monday. Yeah, obviously we could be adding up to some pretty significant rain totals. 5 to 8 inches likely not out of the question. And then once you move into Nevada, back into Arizona, likely 1 to 2 inch rainfall amounts will be dotting the map. And then lighter as you get into the Four Corners regions. It's not until you get to Wednesday, this is Thursday, heading into Friday morning, we could be looking at some significant rains, multi-inch rains. We're probably looking at some flash flooding. It hasn't really rained in this area for the entire month of November, and all of a sudden it comes in all at once. So the ground is dry. So we should start to see flood watches ensued, because it's going to take a harder time to quickly soak in with the 2 inch per hour rainfall rates that we could be looking at a 90 percentile what the atmosphere is capable of with this particular setup that's coming up. So be looking out for some flash flooding if you live in Texas, and that extends through Arkansas, Missouri, back into Illinois, getting into western Tennessee, Kentucky, even extending into Indiana Wednesday through that Friday time frame. But even a bigger setup going forward is going to be up in the stratosphere, right? So next week actually turns really cold in Europe. They're seeing the polar vortex of themselves, freezing conditions back into the Germany region, United Kingdom, as well as into Spain. And at the same time, we'll be having a sudden stratospheric warming event that's happening up here in the stratosphere, where this is about 20 miles, right? 20 miles up in the atmosphere, where you typically get a spike up in those Arctic temperatures with this deep red that's highlighted over northern Canada and Greenland. That will likely top out somewhere in the vicinity of the 24th, 25th time frame. And then after that, with it going cold into Western Europe next week, that will head towards North America as we begin for your Thanksgiving week. In that time frame, that will send the cold plunging southbound. So there's Western Europe with the cold air mass heading into that region going into next week. This will likely be on Wednesday and Thursday, while most of the central part of the U.S. is getting a heavier rains. They're getting major cold in Europe, while we're having that sudden stratospheric warming event up in the Arctic, and that will come down the mid-latitudes, build a significant ridge up here into Alaska, start creating that blocking mechanism. This would likely be on the 25th time frame, heading into your Thanksgiving week, as we see a cold dome of colder air starting to build over the northwest western U.S. as we head into that Thanksgiving week. This is the latest European guidance. This is your overall GFS, kind of implying the same thing. As a ridge will start to be building up here in Alaska, that will be building a trough underneath and start to send pulses of colder air. And as the colder air starts to drain down from the stratosphere into the mid-latitudes and getting closer down into the upper levels of the atmosphere and eventually heading down into the surface, that cold will start to build out west and then start shifting into the central U.S. Here's the setup going into Thanksgiving, as a lot of the cold will be highlighted over the western and getting into the central part of the U.S., while much of the eastern or southeastern eastern half of the U.S. is still on the warmer side, likely for your Thanksgiving, as the cold will be building and moving from west to east. By then, if you look at the EPO, your East Pacific Oscillation, that is a significant drop in the teleconnections once we head into that Thanksgiving week, with the cold building going into next week in Western Europe. That will head to North America. That'll eventually sink down into the mid-latitudes. and the teleconnections are paving the path of a massive plunge in temperatures with a significant dip as we head into that Thanksgiving week, into that Thanksgiving weekend time frame, as we start to see cold air entering the western regions. And if we look at some of the longer range extended guidances, it's starting to pick up on that, right? It's, this is your CFS guidance starting to hint at some of that colder air starting to influence into the North America area, where it's going to be starting northwest and shifting into that last couple of days in November as we begin into December. Should have some much colder temperatures around for the US, completely different than what we're going to be seeing over the next 5 days. And then likely as we head into that first week of December, that cold air will start shifting from west to central and then getting into the eastern half of the US. So guys, I appreciate you watching. Do like this video. Definitely hit the subscribe button and catch me next update while I protect you before and after the storm.